Think of a time in your life where you felt instability. It could be your work situation, school frustrations, or relationship issues. Remember how that made you feel. That feeling is exactly what the world did not want to experience after World War II. World War II, a conflict that caused between 70 and 85 million casualties, left the world yearning for peace and stability. It ripped through Europe and left many nations in shambles. However, two giants emerged from the rubble. The United States and the USSR, or Russia, burst onto the scene as the two major world superpowers. These nations were ideologically opposite, which created immense tension and instability in the world. Technological advancements were dynamic and frequent, especially in weapon production. Long-range missiles, even equipped with a nuclear warhead, offered a new fear for citizens of the world. As a result, both nations had to be prepared to go to war at a moment's notice. With the help of Nike veterans, we will get a glimpse of how the United States prepared for such conflicts.
My name is Bill Jackson. I'd like to welcome you to the Integrated Fire Control Area of the NY56 Nike radar site located out here on Sandy Hook. I am standing right now inside the radar control van, the van from which the missile tracking radars and the target-oriented radars would be controlled from. Behind me here is the target tracking radar console, and you see each man, we had 3 men that were operating the 2 radars, the target tracking, the target ranging radars, and the lower scopes are for the target tracking radar. The upper scope up here on the left is for the target ranging radar. Each man has a scope, and each man has his own responsibility. The man in the extreme left was responsible for elevation or altitude, the man in the center, azimuth or direction, and the man on the right, he was responsible for range. This is the missile tracking radar console right here. From this point, the missile tracking radar operator controlled that radar. These are all the controls he has for operating his radar. He has a scope also for, he can see the lock onto the missile in this scope, and he has to maintain that lock. There's not really too much more he has to do other than maintain that lock on the missile through its flight. We are now in the battery control van of the fire control here on Sandy Hook. This is where the fight would actually take place. Right here on my right, your left, is a bank of cabinets. This bank of cabinets constitute the computer. Originally this was an analog computer and it occupied all 4 cabinets. However, throughout the life of this system, this computer was upgraded to the point where it is now no longer an analog computer, it's a digital computer, and it only occupies the 2 cabinets. And there are no longer any vacuum tubes associated with it. It's now all digital with printed circuit cards. The only place you're going to find printed circuit cards in this entire system. That's one battle station. We had a second battle station right here. This was our plotting board. And we would have a man here who'd be in contact with our higher headquarters through this handset headset. He'd be receiving early warning plotting information and plotting it on this board right here. Behind me over here was the acquisition radar operator. The acquisition radar operator controlled both our low power and our high power acquisition radars from this location. And these are all the controls he has for that operation. He shares his scope right here with the man that sat right here. The man that sat right here, he was the battery control officer, or BCO. He's the man who's going to fight the fight. He's the man who would be launching the missiles, and he would be the one in conjunction with the computer detonating those nuclear warheads. The above here, this console right here, we have two recording devices. These recorded the data relative to the engagement. This one over here, the horizontal plotting board, recorded the range and direction of flight. There were two pens. One pen was for the missile, one pen was for the target. This smaller plotting board right here was the altitude or elevation plotting board. Again, two pens, one for the missile, one for the target. And this would record this engagement. At the conclusion of the engagement, we would have this record for review in our after action report. Brings me to the battery control officer right here. These are all the controls he has for operating this system. This is a digital readout directly from the computer. Displays target speed, target altitude, missile speed, direction the missile's going in, and this all-important counter here. This is the time to go in seconds. That's time to intercept. As that clocks down to 0, he would launch the missile. The computer would be taking information from the missile tracking radars and the two target tracking radars, processing that information, identifying an intercept point, and then steering the missile to that predicted intercept point. Now, since both the missile and the target were constantly in motion, this computer is going to constantly be recalculating that intercept point and reformulating guidance commands as necessary to steer the missile to this newly identified intercept point. Once the missile is in proximity with the target, the computer will initiate a burst command, and that could be backed up by our battery control officer right here by throwing this switch.
These men were highly trained and ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Today, we honor their dedication to the preservation of the safety of this nation, and for doing their part to progress the mission of an everlasting peace among nations of the world.